A reminder that we're partnered with Timothy Taylor's across the Ashes. We were chatting earlier about what makes a proper session after a day at the cricket, and honestly, it's hard to beat a pint of Landlord. They've been brewing the good stuff up in Yorkshire since 1858, still independent, still doing it the right way. Landlord, their flagship multi-award-winning ale, one of those pints that's just perfect. You can taste the quality and heritage in every sip. If you're planning a pub night, treat yourself to a Landlord. And if you don't know where to find one, there's a pint finder at timothytaylor.co.uk/pint-finder. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. Australia are 1-0 up in the 25-26 Ashes after a whirlwind 2 days at the Optus in Perth. 4 sessions into the game, England were leading by 105 runs with 9 second innings wickets in hand. 4 hours later, they were 1-0 down in the series. I'm Yazron, and with me today are Joe Harmon McGowan and Ben Gardner. Before we hear from Mark Butcher, Joe, England have had their fair share of bad days in Australia over the years. Day 2 at Perth, it's got to be up there with one of the worst.
I mean, the horror is still fresh in the mind. Emotions are still running high. But yeah, I can't immediately think of a worse one. It's the hope that kills you. And we've had a fair bit of hope. I don't think we were too bullish, but there was some hope of a decent England performance out there this time. We maybe lost that hope quite quickly on day 1 before recapturing it in kind of stirring fashion. And then by lunch on day 2, it was very, very much there. You're thinking all England have to do really is bat through the rest of the day and the match should have been won. As it is, by the end of day 2, Australia wrapped things up with 3 days to spare. And we talked a lot about the significance of this first test. Always a hugely significant thing in a 5-test series, particularly an Ashes series, but this one felt particularly so for the obvious reasons of Cummins and Hazelwood being out, and it feels like a crushing, devastating blow. And if England do come back from this, it will be one of the great Ashes comebacks because it was just so dire. The manner of the defeat will really take some coming back from. And even if they get themselves into strong positions, these memories of what happened in Perth will still be fresh. So, yeah, really, really tough punch to the gut early on in the series. And yeah, already back to the wall, I'm afraid.
Ben, how are you feeling vibes-wise? You were on the night shifts.
Well,
Just go with that sound.
I could do the entire podcast just in various sounds that suggest I'm feeling at any given moment. Yeah, I mean, still quite tired, and I think the overriding thing is just how quickly.
It's only day 4.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, God forbid if it had.
It's amazing this match could still be going, right? Or should still be going. Yeah.
The thing is just how quickly it all changed. How quickly it went from England are doing okay here to they're in a bit of trouble to hang on. This is going to be over today, and then England scored a few runs. Like, okay, fine, we're going to get a day 3, and then you're thinking that could be one of the worst day 3s of all time, and then you're like, oh, hang on, we're not going to get a day 3, and somehow that's even worse. Like it's like at least we've spared the waking up, but having Head bat as he did to just completely put the rubber stamp on a totally dominant performance for Australia. I guess
it wasn't completely dominant because
last
inning, going into the last innings of the game, we'll get more onto this later in the show, but a lot of people were saying England were favourites going into the last innings. It's only the 27th time in the history of Test cricket that the highest score in the game has been scored to win a Test match.
Yes, a dominant margin for Australia, I suppose.
Yes.
If not a dominant all the way through the game. But I think there is also there is a slight theme of Australia doing this because actually, there have been odd games here and there where England have kind of been in with a sniff in Ashes tests in Australia, even going into a third innings. I was thinking back to the first test of 2017-18 when there was 30 in it in the first innings, and then England get blown away and Australia win by 10 wickets. Similarly, in 13-14, there was a game when England scored 220 odd, but then bowled Australia out and claimed a small lead and were then blown away again, and then Australia knocked it off without fuss. It's almost like when England get into a game, that's when Australia are like, right, come on, what are we doing? Let's pull our socks up and go and just win this game in with often just ridiculous ease, basically, which is what this was in the end. So, but vibes wise, I think I'm feeling a bit better than I was after. It'd be hard to feel much worse after day 2 when you've had about a night's sleep spread across 3 days, and it was all for that. But I think I'm probably more negative than some others are. Like, I think there's probably and we'll probably get more into it over is it more encouraging that the bowling worked once, or that the batting, or is it more discouraging that the batting failed twice? And I think how the batting went is probably more reflective of how bowling will go for the rest of the series than that the bowling will repeat that every time they step onto the park, basically.
So it was my 30th birthday on Saturday night, and a key part of the plan for the evening was to go back to mine to watch day 3. And then obviously a lot of my...
Did you watch the highlights?
We didn't watch the highlights, no. But also, I noticed very, very early on in the evening, a lot of my friends very sweetly asked, how are you feeling? What did you think about the cricket? I answered the first 2 sincerely. Then after that, I just said, I'm not talking about it. I nearly sent a official line on the WhatsApp group to be like, this is
your
what
statement.
This is my statement
for the evening.
I don't want to talk about this. But at the end, I just said, I'm not talking about it.
Listen to the podcast if you want to know. Yeah, and subscribe to the Patreon.
Do you think? I think a lot of the frustration out there is obviously that England lost, obviously in the manner of the defeat, but also, the build-up has been. There's been so much hype. There's been so much build-up, and you kind of expect with an Ashes series, you get up in the dead of the night, and you take your seat, and it's freezing cold out there, and you've got the sunshine in Australia, and you kind of think you can ease yourself into it. But sure, something happens first ball, we know that. But then you can kind of ease yourself into it and just enjoy a bit of Test cricket. And we just didn't have the chance to do that. It was obviously completely thrilling, but also not at all what's meant to happen. And I think...
Other than Australia winning.
Of course. And I think that also kind of gets to the heart of some of the scepticism around Bazball as well, that even when it's going well, there's a kind of suspicion that this just isn't how Test cricket should be played. You have a certain expectation going into a Test match. It's a break from everyday life, which is increasingly happening too quickly and too awfully. And this is just over in a blink of an eye. And it feels like we've been deprived of something. And obviously I feel that as an England supporter. But I was listening to the Grade Cricketer podcast to try and gauge the kind of the mood out there as well, which is clearly triumphant, understandably, and who can blame them. But there was also a bit of frustration on their show that England has just kind of played so stupidly that it's barely even what constitutes a Test match. And I do get that as well. Will they learn lessons from Stokes' post-match comments, from what we've seen over the last 3-4 years? I think it will probably be more of the same. Not necessarily more of the same what we saw at Perth, but hopefully some brilliant stuff mixed in with the awful stuff. But I don't think they're going to massively change the way they play. Probably at any point in the series, however it goes.
Yeah, you're right. Normally it's a slow death, but it's at least kind of something to do, isn't it? Whereas now we've just got so long until that.
11 days between the end of the first Test match and the start of the second. That's too much. We've had too much build-up. Somebody asked in the Patreon after the first day. No, not after the first day. 2 sessions in, when England were 172 all out. When will be your first preview pod for the 27 Ashes? There's been so much preview chat, and unfortunately only 2 days of cricket so far.
But at least that gap does give England's players a chance to go and play a warm-up game. Oh no, actually, no.
Right, next up, Mark Butcher.
It's the morning after. It should be, we should be speaking after day 3, and as it is, we've had just over 24 hours now to digest one of the maddest tests in Ashes history, one of England's worst defeats in years. And I'm still kind of sat here racking my brains thinking, how did it go so wrong so quickly, basically? It was after lunch on day 2, they were effectively 105 for 1. The game is over a few hours later. And I think that feels like it's going to be a bit of a theme of the next few days, trying to figure out where the blame lies. It was interesting hearing McCullum saying that he thought 200 was going to be enough to defend, and the bowlers didn't stick to their lengths enough in the face of a Travis Head assault. And then obviously you look at that period where they lose 3 wickets for no run in the middle of that second afternoon and think, how can the blame not be the batters? And then if it is the fault of the batters, is it an approach thing, or is it a technical thing, or is it a decision-making thing? Just where do you think it went wrong, or is it all of the above?
All right. Let's start with the bits that are obvious, right? before the Test match started, obviously with Australia had issues in terms of what would have been their preferred starting 11. And so before the series started, Starc obviously was kind of like the danger man. And my God, did he come to the party without his mates Hazelwood and Cummins. 7 for awesome, 10 for in the match in very, very quick time. He bowled less than 25 overs, I think, in the Test to take 10 with. And so, what a huge performance from him. I still think Travis Head, on the other hand, should have been man of the match in a bowler-dominated Test match. That was quite remarkable, but not altogether surprising. I mean, he for me was there were 2 danger men for Australia. One was Starc, the other one was Head, and both of them kind of had the final say in the Test match. So, just hats off to a couple of stunning performances in a Test match where I think Australia would have been very, very nervous leading into it. Given England's quick bowling resources, given the pitch, given everything really, and given the position they found themselves in on first innings, behind by 40-odd runs. So staggering performances from two top cricketers. I mean, Travis Head, I preferred him to Brook in my combined Ashes 11, and basically that was the reason why. You think to Ahmedabad in the World Cup final, you think to the World Test Championship final. Here is a guy that is capable of kind of winning a match that nobody else seems to be able to grasp. And not only that, he did it from opening the batting as opposed to batting at number 5. He's just incredibly dangerous and incredibly smart. And I think that brings me on to the next point, which is about England's batting. Right, there are certain rules of thumb when you go down to Australia, particularly when you're playing in Perth, when you're batting early in Brisbane. The 2 hardest, fastest, bounciest pitches. And the rule of thumb basically is don't drive on the up, and leave balls wide of off stump unless you can cut or pull them. Those are the basic sort of tenets of it. And so as far as England's batting approach was concerned, Head sort of proved that being ultra positive was a good thing. However, the way that you are ultra positive and the balls that you decide to target to be ultra positive too are incredibly important. So a one size fits all, we're just going to go at everything and try and put the pressure back on the bowlers, doesn't work. It works in terms of the mentality. Yes, a quick game or a short game, sitting in and trying to block and protect your wicket, etc., didn't work for Australia in the first innings, and how quickly they turned around the idea of how the best way to go was on the pitch. But they still left the ball. They still defended with a straight bat when it was required, and then had the approach to play with a horizontal bat, full-blooded when anything was short enough or wide enough to have a go at. The drive through extra cover was firmly put away. I don't think Travis Head played one off the front foot, particularly not on the up. So, approach-wise, on a pitch like that, I think, yes, go hard and try to put some sort of pressure back on the bowlers to throw them off their length, which is exactly what happened to England. It's ironic, isn't it, that a team whose motto is to throw bowlers off their length, to throw some pressure back onto the bowlers, so very quickly in the face of Head's counter-attack, went away from what had been most successful, which was to bowl length, to keep hitting a length hard, keep trying to force batsmen onto the front foot, keep your catches in at slip. And very, very quickly England just went away from that plan in the face of the sort of thing that they try to do to the opposition. Yeah, I think we were always slightly concerned in the lead up about the potential fragility of England's batting lineup. However, 105 for 1 second innings, you've got the game at your mercy, and completely unable to take advantage of it, as they had been. England were 2 down in the Ashes in 2023 at home, 2 matches that they arguably should have won. Both games were in positions of strength, and neither time were they able to nail them. Happened against India over the course of the summer just gone as well. And so, having that sort of ruthless streak that England have talked about is something that they've not been able to apply in matches where they're ahead of the game. We're all a little bit shell shocked because it was completely bonkers from start to finish, and ironically, England showed, particularly with the ball, just how dangerous a side they can be. Just how why Australia were right to have been worried and concerned, after day one of the Test match, let alone into the lead up of it. And I think that's what makes it so galling is not quite the right word, but it's a horrendous loss, and one that will take an enormous amount of character to bounce back from.
Yeah, I mean, I think galling is right, because I think that the thing with England's bowling is that they showed that when they all click, they can trouble Australia, which is great. My worry is that I'm not sure they will all click every time, basically, as we saw in the second innings, but also like Bryden Cast, that was maybe as well as he's bowled in Test cricket, or he's bowled some really good spells, but we also know that he can bowl some good spells and then follow them up with some spells which aren't so good. We know that, Wood and Archer, are they going to play all 5 tests each? Almost certainly not. And like, so that you almost have to make the times when they do really get under Australia's skin count. And I see Australia making runs against England's attack almost more than I see England doing against Australia's attack, even though, England do have some very good players, and maybe when the pitch isn't as fast, some of the issues which you've highlighted about driving on the up won't be as much of an issue. I don't know.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, if you go back to the lead up to it, and all the chat was that England were going to play 5 quicks, and I thought that was wrong. I still think that's wrong, because again, you take this Test match and these conditions in slight isolation, albeit that in Brisbane it could be a similar sort of story with the pink ball Test. We don't know yet, but if you look at it, my feeling was that if the game is going to be quick, that 4 of your 4 quick bowlers are going to be enough. I wasn't talking about playing a spinner. I was talking about having another batter in there in Will Jacks at 8, somebody who can be very, very dangerous, particularly when the ball gets past it's sort of 30. Not that England got very far past that, but you understand what I'm saying. So somebody that was going to play more of a role, potentially more of a pivotal role than a quick. So, for example, Mark Wood, brilliant, bowls quick, wholehearted, the whole thing. However, he bowled 11 overs in the Test match, didn't pick up a wicket, didn't contribute with the bat. You wouldn't expect him to in conditions like that. Ben Stokes, came into the attack in the 28th or 29th over in that first innings and took 5 wickets in 6 overs. Now, if he'd been the 4th seamer, he'd have come on much sooner than that. And potentially England's lead in the first innings could have been even more. He's been England's best bowler in the Test matches that he's played for at least the last 12 months. And yet he doesn't come in, because there are 4 other quick bowlers to give the ball to before him. He doesn't come into the attack until much, much later in the piece. So I felt that in my bones, I felt that was the wrong approach. And of course, after day one, everyone said, well, it was brilliant. But in terms of actually what happened, that 5th bowler was superfluous, and it was superfluous throughout the Test match. But another batter, somebody capable of scoring quick and large and big runs, I think would have been much more useful given the circumstances. I also could not believe, and we're talking tactically here as opposed to actually the performance in the game in the end, that you would play 5 once they've decided to play the 5 quicks on a pitch which was obviously going to do plenty and was going to be extremely difficult to batting on. They chose to bat first. Now, for me, you're not worried about what's happening on day 4 or 5 and the cracks opening up and all the rest of it, because the game's going to be done quick. And England will choose to chase, even on pitches where you'd say that batting first was an absolute dead set. They'd much rather try and chase down runs in the last innings of the game. So I couldn't understand that either. That didn't make any sense to me, that you wouldn't unleash your 5 quicks day one. Whatever. In the end, it doesn't make a great deal of difference, but it does. I think of an example of a team that over the last 3 or 4 years have played 5 fast bowlers. I don't like it, but anyway, that's what they do. Surrey won 3 championships back to back and almost won a 4th by doing exactly that. You play 5 quicks, you bowl first, By the time you get to sort of day 2.5, day 3, and lots of wickets would have fallen by then, by the way, because the pitches are spicy and they do that on purpose at the Oval. The pitch actually gets a little bit easier to bat on and becomes more gentle, because on pitches that start dry, they deteriorate as the game goes on. And pitches that start with a bit of live grass and a bit of moisture in them, by the time you get to day 2, day 3, they're actually starting to play like they would have done on day 1. So I couldn't for the life of me understand that. However, that's not the reason why England lost the Test match. That's just me thinking around sort of like the brains trust in terms of what England are trying to do. So there were one or two things tactically that baffled me. The batting perhaps wasn't much of a surprise. You always felt that was possible in those conditions, that Australia's bowlers would find a way. But let's not forget, Australia were playing very much a sort of second string attack Starc side, and things are only going to get more difficult for them if and when Hazelwood and Cummins make an appearance. And so, you're barely going to get a better chance. 105 for 1. Australia, 2 of their champion bowlers down to win a Test match in Australia, given England haven't won one since 2010-11, and yet they spurned the opportunity. It's just such a waste.
Yeah, and it's interesting because talking about the toss, you're right that England, in terms of how the game played out, sort of got away with it. But that almost makes the missed opportunity on day 2 even worse, because we saw actually, I think, with how England's tail went and then how Head went, I think the pitch had started to ease up just a little bit, as it did at Perth. Like, the Test could have followed a very similar pattern to the India Test last year. And what India did on day 2 on that game was just throw a blanket over the situation. Was KR Rahul and Yashasvi Jaiswal were just like, right, we're just going to get to stumps, and they batted brilliantly. And England maybe just don't have players of the kind of technical class who can do that and also are going to play in their way. But that does just make you feel that like actually, if England had batted through overs 30 to 60 in their innings, they could have really cashed in. And then all of a sudden, that like almost the fact they got away with so many things, like so many things in a way fell in England's favour in this Test, even though they made some mistakes, and then they still got thumped by 8 wickets. One thing I was wondering about the fast bowler thing is that I wonder if a counter argument possibly is that while you're right that you're never going to, it's rare that you're going to need all 5 fast bowlers to take 2 wickets each. It's hard to know going into a Test whose day it's going to be and whose day it's not going to be, if you see what I mean.
Well, yeah, but I get that, but in that case, you play 7 of them, right? I mean, it's just that's you go for that's the art of selection. You go for the 4 guys who are in the best form and you think are going to exploit the conditions of the best, and you make them and you give them the opportunity to take the wickets. But sort of sharing it around, because you've got 5, you have to bowl 5. Otherwise, there's not been much point in playing them. Means that sometimes the guy who's bowling the best isn't bowling. You know what I mean? So I just felt that runs were going to be an absolute premium, and having an extra batter in there would have served us better. But again, listen, that actually doesn't matter. None of that stuff really matters. What matters is that you get yourself into a position to win a Test match, and are singularly incapable of being able to temper your attacking instincts according to the conditions that you're provided with at the time. And I'm definitely not saying that England shouldn't have tried to get on the front foot, metaphorically, and try to play in aggressive fashion, because Travis Head proved that was the way to go, as did Harry Brook in the first innings. But there are certain parameters within which you have to do that, given the conditions that you're facing. And Australia adapted to it very, very well. I mean, as you'd expect. I mean, again, you could go back to the old preparation argument that Lilac Hill, very flat, low, slow pitch. Australia, in order to get your head around the idea that Sachin Tendulkar style, you've got to put away the extra cover drive for the course of the Test match and try and find other ways of scoring. Was something that was not built into the DNA in the lead up to the Test match. But guaranteed they would have spoken about it, or at least you hope they would have done. They've spoken about sort of where are the dangers here? How do we play our own game but minimize, put the odds in our favor in terms of run scoring at the sort of rates that we want to, but we cannot just allow the opposition, who are very, very smart to our tactics, just to go, okay, well, we're going to feed it outside off stump, 6th, 7th stump, on a good length, a full length, and they're going to come and they're going to nick them, and we're going to knock them over. You'd be the worst poker players in the world, because you either got a great hand or you're bluffing. There's nothing in between. So, it's just I don't know. The thing with England is, and part of the reason why in the lead up to it, I was so excited and everybody else was, because you have no idea what could happen. I mean, they could come out in the next one at Brisbane and blitz it all over the place, playing exactly the same way, and win the Test match in 3 days themselves. It's just that's the madness of watching this team play. There is no consistency of anything. But there is a lot of skill and there's a lot of character, because we've seen them bounce back from things like this before. But my God, they make it hard for themselves.
Yeah, well, that was actually the last thing I wanted to ask is where are you now on the kind of optimism, pessimism scale versus where you were before the Test match? Because from one point of view, they've squandered what looks like a brilliant opportunity. Australia 2 senior quicks down. If you go, and the next is being a day night when Australia is so good, you could see how that works in their favour more. On the other hand, I think England have maybe taken like 2 first innings leads against Australia since that 10-11 Ashes in Australia, and now this is the 3rd one. And so to have Australia in trouble in a live Test match in Australia is something that they have just basically never done before, but did in this game. Is like could basically give me a reason to want to get up for that day-night Test match in whenever it is 10 or 13 days time or whatever.
Well, the reason is exactly as I've outlined before. It could be awful. It could be horrendous, but it could be brilliant too. I mean, that's kind of therein lies the paradox of the England cricket team. No matter what they do, whether they bowl first or bat first, the incredible things could happen. There is enough skill, enough match winners in that setup that somebody has an incredible day, and they end up with their noses way in front, as they did in this one. But then there is also the sort of like the nagging dread that it could all fall in a horrible heap, and it could be a humiliating loss again. So there is your reason. That's absolutely your reason. I think the interesting thing is that at the start of this McCullum-Stokes thing, the chat was around bringing people back to Test match cricket, entertainment, all that kind of stuff. And that the results almost seemed secondary at the beginning. And one of the things that I noted, particularly in that Ashes series in 2023, was that you don't actually have to convince people to watch the Ashes. You don't have to do extraordinary things and play in an ultra entertaining way in order to have people feel that the Ashes is important, worth watching. It just is. That's that's just baked in. And so, therefore, Australia kind of go, well, our hard-nosed approach is going to beat their sort of maverick, cavalier approach every time, because when it comes down to it, we will be smarter and we'll have the end result at the forefront of our minds, perhaps more than England will. And what I'm not saying that England aren't taking this seriously, and I'm not saying that they aren't desperate to come and win the Ashes. I mean, Stokes is absolutely bursting out of his skin to come back as an Ashes winning captain. But sort of in their DNA, the ability to recognise when the position is there to actually nail down an advantage, or to put the foot on the throat of the opposition and keep it there. They're unable somehow to make that count. The mind switch doesn't flick on and go, okay, here we go. Here is the moment. Here is the moment where the approach needs to be a little bit more hard-nosed, a bit smarter. And let's make sure we get the W on the board, as opposed to sort of just carrying on as though all the results are going to take care of themselves if we're fun enough to watch.
Cool. Well, I think I'm just about convinced that I can get up, and it's a bit of a late start as well, isn't it? So you can get a bit more sleep in before
you can get a bit more kit beforehand. Yeah. I mean, and there'll be a bit more to watch in the morning. So don't despair, but kind of, as I said beforehand, that jingoistic pub thumping, we're going to go down there and smash them type nonsense was always nonsense, because Australia are unbelievably difficult to beat at home. They raise their game for the Ashes in a way that sometimes we're incapable of doing. And just because we are very, very dangerous in terms of individuals does not mean that when it comes down to it, that is going to turn into results. However, it could. It absolutely could.
Okay.
It's mad.
Cheers for your time, Butch. And I'm sure, we've got plenty more time to talk now between now and the next test. So.
Oh, good Lord. Yeah. Well, the other interesting thing, I suppose, is they've got it's a boiling controversy or a simmering controversy around whether or not any of England's sort of first choice 11 are going to play in this pink ball game in Canberra. I think Stokes said in his post-match interview that they weren't planning on sending anybody there. It'll be the Lions or whatever they're going to play in it. But I do wonder if some of the batters might stick their hand up and go, you know what, it wouldn't be a bad idea to go and practice letting a few go outside off stump, trying to drive when the ball is a little bit closer to you as opposed to sort of 2.5 meters away and throwing your hands at it. Zach Crawley, Harry Brook, Ollie Pope, Joe Root, they all did it. And so, it might not be a bad idea. England don't play very, very little pink ball cricket, and sort of getting used to that visually, etc., and the way it behaves might not be a bad idea. And let's face it, if none of them do go and things go badly in the second Test match, then they are going to get absolutely crucified for it. I think the cross is going up now anyway, but they've been nailed to it if that occurs. So it's going to be interesting over the next couple of weeks. See what they do. And then, of course, see if they can bounce back in Brisbane.
Yeah, it would be mad. Because it's also just going to be so long without playing cricket if they don't play that game because of this being a 2-day test.
Yeah, exactly. What do you sort of spend the time doing? And you can't tell me that nearly all of them. Pope actually shaped up pretty good. Brook did what Brook does in the first innings. Duckett looked as though he had some sort of an idea about what was going on. Got a couple of good deliveries. But you would certainly say that there are a few that could do with a gallop or two. And then bowling wise, and pretty damn good. I do think that they were thrown off the plan too quickly by Travis Head. And of course, that would have come as a little bit of a surprise to them. They wouldn't have expected them to throw him out early on. And I think it's worth finishing on the fact that he is a fabulous player. I don't think he'll open the batting in the next test. Khawaja might go missing. They might just decide to pick another one. Send a sacrificial lamb up there and keep the guy back to do what he does so well and so dangerously in the middle order. I think the circumstances in this test match were so wildly different from most that you faced, that the idea of him coming up the order for that one was a good plan, clearly. But I think they'll go back to him back at 5 in the next one, and maybe come up with another opener. The openers are almost sacrificial, aren't they? Given the quality of the fast bowling on both sides with the new ball. Head to bat at 5 again, I think.
Yeah, I think Smith also hated batting at 3 in that first innings. Like he was almost timed out because I think he was caught on the hop by the Khawaja thing. And then was just the most out of sorts he's basically ever been in Test cricket, and was saying after the game that they even thought about sending Lyon in as a sort of like, as you say, sacrificial opener, just so he can keep that number 4 spot rather than number 3 spot. And I think that is the thing that is tempering my hopes that England might get on top of Smith this series, is that I think that really did jumble him up. But yeah, as you say, Head brilliant, and England going to have to find a way around him if they're going to get back into it.
And there's also rumours that Hazelwood and Cummins aren't going to be ready for Brisbane. Hazelwood in particular. Cummins might make it because given the amount of time, but sounds like Hazelwood's injury is a lot more serious perhaps than we thought. So again, England will have an opportunity against a slightly lesser Australian fast bowling attack, and it'll be a case of whether or not they can make that count.
Cricket 26 is out now, available to buy. The new game from Big Ant Studios, bringing you closer to the game than ever before. Take command in the all-new management career mode, engage in the intensity of the Ashes and build your dream squad. With enhanced gameplay, smarter fielding and total control at the crease, every shot, every strategy, every victory is yours. Cricket 26 is available to buy now. Following the mind-boggling first Ashes test, who knows how this series will play out? The iconic MCG hosts the Boxing Day test, one of the standout events on the cricketing calendar. Melbourne is Australia's sporting and events capital, regularly playing host to some of the world's biggest international sporting events like the Australian F1 Grand Prix, the Aussie Open Grand Slam tennis tournament, the first regular season NFL contest in Australia in 2026, and the one-off, once-in-a-lifetime 150th anniversary test in March 2027. On Melbourne's doorstep, discover nature and wildlife and incredible food and wine on a road trip through Victoria. Ben, the criticism directed towards England has been intense. Boycott called the side stupid. Has the criticism been fair? I get a lot of it, but at the same time, McCullum did an interview with TMS where he talked about how he actually thought 200 was a very defendable score, and ultimately they got undone by a freakish innings from Head, and the innings that won Australia the game was the most overtly aggressive individual batting performance in the test match. So how legitimate is criticism of England being aggressive with the bat when it was aggression that helped Australia score the highest total of the game? McCullum's got a lot of criticism for what he said in that interview with TMS. Do you think that's fair, and the overall criticism of England and their performance is fair, given that they were also actually, with one innings to go in the game, right in it?
It's weird. In some ways, Head playing like he did has almost bailed England out. Like if Australia had chased that down sort of in traditional sort of Australia fashion with Smith and Labuschagne knocking it off in 80 overs and blocking it out and getting it in singles and that sort of thing, then they wouldn't have this defence. But that doesn't mean that the defence isn't sort of fair in some ways, because you do see, and McCullum is right to pinpoint that England were knocked off their lengths, and that is what you can do with aggressive batting. And also it's a slightly moot point in that, you know, England are obviously not going to stop playing aggressively now. I think the frustration really is more, it's that there's ways to be smart aggressive, or you can just go and, you know, try and just hit every ball. And it's the options you choose as well. So I think that, you know, everyone, all the ex-pros, or the has-beens as Stokes calls them, will tell you that at Perth, you can play with a straight bat, fine, or you can play with a horizontal bat, you can cut and pull, fine. What you don't do is you put the angled, the forward bat shot away, you don't drive through cover. And that is basically what undid England on that second afternoon to Boland, was playing to sort of balls that weren't there to drive, not full half volleys, they were trying to hit him off his length, and his length was just too good. And that is the worry, I guess, is that I think maybe in conditions where there is a type of delivery that is too good to hit, England almost can't compute that. They think that there must be a way that we can score a boundary off this. We just need to figure out what it is. And we've seen that in the subcontinent at times as well, I think, when they will just like get out in a blaze of shots because you can't countenance being tied down when the ball is spinning and waiting for a bad ball. England can't wait for the bad ball. They want to force the bad ball. There will be times when, and deliveries that you can't hit for four. The frustrations that they didn't realise that in this game. So I think that criticism is definitely fair of England, and it's, I guess, predictable as well, isn't it?
And I think it's certainly too simplistic to say it's too much aggression, because you take Brooke as an example. He played with a lot of aggression in the first innings, top scored, really seized the game by the scruff of the neck at that point. And his shot in the second innings actually wasn't especially aggressive. It was a shot he shouldn't have played, but even if he had made full contact rather than edged it, I don't think it was right. It probably wouldn't have even been a boundary. It wasn't a full-blooded drive by any means. And that's kind of the frustration. It was almost like there was no win to be gained there. He just got sucked in the heat of the battle. Things were happening really quickly, and I think England's minds got collectively foggy.
Do you think there's a danger that England are getting in a bit of a muddle in terms of how they view the way in which you counteract good bowling? There was a really interesting piece by Vitushan Hantaraja on Quick Info where he focuses on a comment Stokes made that wasn't directed at any player in particular, but how England could have been a bit more proactive at times in disrupting the lengths that Australia were bowling when Australia were bowling well. And if you look at the game, England didn't bat for very long, so not too hard to work out what he might have been talking about. It's probably around the Ollie Pope innings, and Pope batted really well in the first innings for his 46. You almost didn't notice it, which isn't something you'd often say with Pope in Test cricket. He wasn't as skittish as he normally was, and then Boland, bowling a lot better in the second innings than he did in the first innings, has a spell towards Pope where Pope doesn't really get him away. And Pope sort of does try and be aggressive, plays and misses a few times, and is eventually out playing the shot that he nearly got out to a few times. But that's not what people did in Test cricket until very, very recently. And are we saying that everyone should be doing that? I understand with Brook, he's got this immensely successful record in Test cricket, averaging more than 55, striking at 90, basically gets a 50 every Test match. But is that the way for everyone all the time to counteract good bowling? Because it feels like I can see how players, not Brook, but the rest of them might get quite confused if they're basically being told if they're bowling well, you've got to have a go.
Well, of course, that can't be the only way to play. It makes no sense. It doesn't take into account the way the bowler's bowling, doesn't take into account the conditions, also doesn't take into account form, be it long-term form or short-term form. Pope looked really good in the first innings, but as we've seen in his England career, he'll make 2 steps forward and then there'll suddenly be a step back, and he looked unsure of himself, and he played and missed quite a few times. But then the suspicion is that the doubt starts creeping because he thinks, well, I'm not scoring quick enough, I need to dominate. But actually, you don't need to dominate. You can just dig in, fight your way through that battle, and then come out the other end. And if we're potentially highlighting that period of play where Pope didn't score many runs as the reason for England then falling to pieces, that shows how warped we all are about Bazball, because it's much more to do with the shot he played that got him out. You know, if he goes on to make 100, no one remembers that he played and missed a dozen times or however many times it was. The fact is, he got out after doing that, doesn't have a chance to kind of put an imprint on the game. And then England make the same mistakes within minutes, almost seconds of each other, and before you know it, the game's gone.
I think I'm trying to think as well. What will England say in response to this? And I think they might say 2 things. So what one is that, like, they would also point to how Australia went in the first innings when they were 1 down after 14 overs. But it felt like England were all over them because they were, Steve Smith was playing a foul shot every 2 balls, and they were only 28 for 1. And how might England have approached the situation? Now they might say that, okay, they might have been, that they would have tried to attack England. Okay, they might have been 3 down at that stage, but being 1 now didn't help Australia much because England were able to bowl so well because Australia were letting them bowl well. And they would also point to how Boland bowled in the first innings and feel that they did manage to hit him off his length then. I guess you could maybe then say that the issue, maybe they might feel that Pope could have tried something before lunch when Boland first comes on to bowl. The question is then, though, when you do have a guy who is in rhythm, who is then bowling well, like, that's not the time to hit someone off their length. You've always got to do it before they do. And then, 1, give the opposition a bit of credit if they start playing well. And then 2, I think it's almost like they feel like they need to affect everything that happens in a game. They can't almost let a game sort of like take its course. They can't be like, okay, they're bowling well right now, maybe in a bit they won't be bowling well. It's almost like they think, well, if they're bowling well right now, they're not going to stop bowling well until we do something. And again, that is not how Test cricket has generally worked. Guys get tired. And that's the other frustration about this, is that Australia were in some ways quite close to breaking point. Like, you had guys who were going off for treatment here and there. I think you had Lyon off a bit of time. You had Boland off for a bit of time. Obviously, you had Starc in the first innings as well. That the feeling was that actually it might not have taken very long at all before you were forced into like maybe a long spell of Cam Green or something, or Lyon on a 2-day pitch, and you have a chance to really take it away from them, and they shouldn't give themselves that chance.
A couple of stats around England's performance with the bat, by the way. The 67.5 overs they batted for is the fewest they faced in a test in which they've been bowled out twice since 1904. And when Alistair Cook scored his double 100 at Brisbane 15 years ago, he faced more balls in that innings than England faced in this entire test match. So 428 balls Cook faced. In 2010, England faced 405 across the 2 innings. And I think I was trying to work out how I felt about the England collapse. Because I still think at some level, they were in a decent position at the end of their second innings. So I don't want to go too hard on them. But the frustration was just basically how predictable the manner of their struggle was. The way I'd put it is, if you asked me 6 months ago if I was in a bad mood, what do you think? What is going to happen in the Ashes? I'd say, well, Australia going to win 4-1 because they're going to bowl a 6-stump line and go short early to England's more aggressive players, and England are going to get bored, and that's going to be their downfall. And that's basically what happened, not just in the second innings, but the first innings as well. Brook is out to the third ball he faces from Brendan Doggett, exclusively going short. It's not the way we predicted Brook might fall against a short ball in Australia. If anything, he doesn't play the shot he normally plays. He pulls out of it at the last moment, and that's how he gets out. But you go back to the Sri Lanka Test match at the Oval last year, where Sri Lanka just bowled a 6-stump line to Harry Brook, and he got bored basically, and England collapsed very, very quickly and lose the Test match. And there was a similar game in Pakistan last year where England were going really well in their first innings, 211 for 2, 150 runs behind Pakistan. They collapsed to 291 all out, and when chasing 297 in their fourth innings, they collapsed to 144 all out in 33 overs. And there was an interview that Jason Gillespie gave on the Willow Talk podcast last year, and he was the Pakistan coach on that tour that Pakistan won. He said that England at times were just A, predictable, but B, impatient with both bat and ball, which I thought was quite an interesting comment. He said that if plan A doesn't work for a short period of time, they'll just bowl bouncers. So if you're patient against England, you can sort of quite easily predict what they're going to do.
And we absolutely saw that, didn't we? We saw that on day 2. And it felt like, again, this is, and I heard you and Phil talking about this on day 1, that, Stokes is constantly trying to make an impact on the game. And obviously it's why he's so watchable as a captain and a cricketer. But there are some times when you can just take a little step back, or at least try and slow things down, and try and get Travis Head off strike for a little bit of the game. Really put some pressure on Weatherald, who's still making his Ashes debut, gets a second ball duck in the first Test, but you kind of barely saw him for much of the game. It just felt like it was England versus Travis Head for a good chunk of it.
Ben, highly unlikely there'll be any changes to the England top 7, barring injury or illness, for the second Test match. We've talked about Zach Crawley on the podcast
once or twice before.
Didn't have a great game, didn't score a run, and I know that under this regime you never really know with Zach Crawley what sort of run of form he needs to go on for his position to actually be under threat. But do you think there's a chance that it is under threat at some point during this tour? I know part of the reason England have persisted with him is because they think he's got a game that will suit Australian conditions. It couldn't have started any worse for him.
No, it literally couldn't have started any worse. I mean, the first pair by an England batter in Australia since weirdly John Crawley, I think, in the mid-90s.
That is weird, isn't it?
And yeah. McCullum almost said, he's only faced 11 balls, so you can't really tell if he's in form or out of form, basically. Look, if Crawley doesn't get a score, at some point England are going to have to drop him. Like, it is just like, how long is that rope going to be? But I do think that there is definitely, it's possible that could come after the second Test if he struggles, if he fails both times and England lose again, and all of a sudden it's do or die, it's right now. And then after the third Test, we're throwing quite a long way into the future. He could easily get a score of some sort between now and then. And as we know with Crawley, it might not even need to be too much. It could be like one of those 30 odds when Ben Duckett makes 80, but they give him credit for half the 80 or something, and that works in his favour. But if that doesn't happen, then and you're 3-0 down, and again, don't want to be too pessimistic, but if that does happen, then you'd almost see that's not that it actually wouldn't be tenable at that point. And also, that's just how these things happen. Ashes tours, they are where eras unravel and end, and careers come to sort of an end and that kind of thing. And that does feel like he's got the 1 year central contract. It's not the 2 year he would have had in the past. Maybe that story is coming to a close, or maybe he does come out and play as he has done at times in his Test career. But if it does end as it does, it's going to be you're going to be able to question the whole Zach Crawley project basically with quite a lot of weight behind you. Like, I was just looking up who has played as many Tests as him to have as poor a record basically, and you're looking at there will be a case we made that he would be, at this point, he is the worst batter ever, or one of the worst batters ever to play 60 Tests. Like, you've got 3 specialist bats have played as many Tests to average less than him. And even like Mohammad Ashraful, who averaged 24 from 61 Tests, he's got one more Test 100 than Zach Crawley does. So it's 5 Tests and
played for
Tests.
Bangladesh, who obviously have such limited resources by comparison. This is the frustration, that England have got so much batting talent out there, but they've continued with this project for so long now. And I was thinking the other day, in 20 years' time, when an aspiring cricket journalist is learning about the history of the game, and
it's a great Patreon episode of this.
Pick out Zach Crawley on Cricinfo or Wisden.com, and they look at his record, and you're like, how has this guy played so many matches? Like, what has happened here for an England opener to play, 60 odd Test matches and average by that stage potentially, 33 or 32? And there is, he is obviously a bugbear for a lot of England fans, and increasingly rightly so, because I think there's every chance if the series goes south from here, if it's possible to go south from here, but if it continues on this current trend, that Crawley will eventually lose his place, and most likely Bethell would come in to open the batting with Duckett and Pope at 3. And there'll be a lot of people who say, well, why didn't we just do that at the start of the Test summer that's just gone? There was the conversation of it's 2 of 3 of Bethell, Crawley and Pope, but the feeling was always it was Bethell or Pope for number 3. Crawley seemed to, for some reason, have be safe in his position.
Partly because of what England actually said themselves.
Absolutely. But, given what had happened in New Zealand against Matt Henry, that was kind of extraordinary, really. So we could be at a situation now where Bethell and Duckett were an opening pair who had a Test summer against India, had a kind of warm-up test against Zimbabwe, and were established opening pair taking on Australia. As it is, if Bethell comes in, it's probably going to be 2-0 down or 3-0 down. And it's the worst possible situation to throw in a youngster who England have hugely high expectations and hopes for, at a time when it's a pressurised situation and it's do or die immediately. And there was always a chance that the Crawley experiment might come off, but the evidence to support that was increasingly small. What happened at Perth was just a continuation of what we've seen for quite a while now.
Yeah, so just some stats on Crawley. So he averages 20 from his 4 tests in Australia. Overall, full stop, it's 25.5 from 31 Test matches. The only specialist batters to have played 30 away tests with a worse average are Mohammad Ashraful, Grant Flower, Darren Ganga, and Sid Gregory, the Aussie who played his last test 113 years ago. And in his last 14 away knocks, he's been out for under 10 9 times.
Yeah, I mean, what again, I'm trying to think what England would say about Crawley. And I guess they'd say one of two things, one of which I think is basically patently false across career, and the other I think has some merit. The thing they'd say which is false, that he is a match winner. I think you'd actually struggle to find a Test match almost that you can argue definitively that without Crawley, England definitely would not have won that Test match. Basically, like he's made 200s in Test wins. Rawalpindi when everyone made 100, and Zimbabwe when lots of people made runs as well. And I don't think Crawley was decisive in that game. And those are his 200s in Test wins. He's got a few 50s here and there. A couple times when he's just about been the highest scorer in an England win, but never been the dominant figure in an England win like that. So I think that is.
He's been around for 6 years.
Yeah. So that is a long time to go without playing a match, putting in a match performance. Basically, what they would say, on the other hand, is that he has a good partnership with Duckett, which is true, and their attributes suit each other as a tall right-hander and a short left-hander. And they obviously they like him as a character, but also he's a really good slip fielder. So he brings some value, and also that he's although his record overall like ranks down there with some of the worst in history, that's almost only because he's played as long as he has. Like against other England openers of the same era, his record isn't noticeably awful. Averaging 30 is his Test average now dropped a touch below Rory Burns's, I think, but it's not as if there is a guy who averaged 35 as an opener and they've gone for over this guy who they happen to like. And maybe he's had some slightly easier batting conditions in England. That's something they'll say. The thing is now is that he does just need, I think, pretty much a match-winning performance in the next 2 games, or for England to win one of those games anyway. And I would say it's unlikely to happen, but who knows? Let's see.
It feels like the overriding reason he's still there is out of sheer stubbornness, and partly because he's come to symbolise the whole project, the whole experiment, and by dropping him, that would be seen to be an acceptance that they haven't got it right all the way through. And they're not very good at doing that. And I think that's, again, one of the major frustrations that England fans have with this current setup. It's not to kind of come out and apologise and say we shouldn't have done this, but just to now and again acknowledge a mistake has been made or a weakness on their part, But there's a refusal to do that, as though by admitting one small thing, the whole thing will collapse. And I just don't think that's how things work. And, they almost proudly say they don't care what the media says. And I don't think that's the problem in itself. And sometimes you can get the siege mentality and it really works. And I think it has done for England at times. But it does suggest really that they just don't listen or not so much don't listen, but don't learn and don't adapt. And there is no better example of that than the batting performance at Perth, when we just saw a succession of very similar dismissals by England's best players.
Absolutely. Kat from the Discord asks, are there any straws at all that are worth clutching to for England? For example, Archer and Wood presumably aren't overworked, so both are fit for Brisbane. Root surely can't do the same thing for a third time, and Duckett's still a world-class opener. Anything, Ben?
Yeah, well, I mean, that bowling performance on day one was extraordinary, and if we're talking about English management and what they've got wrong, then they deserve a lot of credit for this, for kind of cultivating this over 2 years or more, this kind of project pace where you have the fastest England attack ever assembled, basically taking unpopular decisions, and they're not afraid of an unpopular decisions, despite how much they talk about wanting to engage the public. They will do something like that if they think it's in their interest, as they did with pensioning off James Anderson, as they are going to do with the Canberra warm-up game, which we'll get to. And it was incredible to watch, honestly. And even someone who was not one of the most talked about. And we talked a lot about Archer in the build-up to the series. Maybe Wood, because he's coming back in. Stokes, maybe the bowler that he could always have been, and being England's best bowler now. Cast was someone we hadn't talked that much about, and actually, if anything, I think was England's best bowler in that first innings. To get out Smith and Khawaja, probably Australia's two most stubborn players.
And the ball to Khawaja as well.
That was
amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, incredible. And fun, it's strange if that is, as I guess we might talk about in a bit in the end, if that is the end of his Test career. It's strange that there was nothing he could do about it, sort of thing. And yet that might be the thing that ends it. The note of caution I would add in the optimism is looking at that second innings bowling performance. And I think that you could choose to write it off if you want to, if you are just looking for optimism, say Head got on top of them, they didn't have enough to bowl at, they hadn't had enough rest, and all of that is true to an extent. But also, I basically just worry that in general, England are showing their bowling attack that it's capable of having days out when it all clicks, but it is just not going to all click every time, and they need to really capitalise on the times when it does, and they didn't in this game. If I'm trying for a couple more,
well, just say on that, just to back your point up, I think they were absolutely brilliant in the first innings, but something that is a bit of a warning sign, I think, is how markedly the pace was down for Atkinson and Archer in the second. I know they didn't bowl loads of overs in the first innings, but they also didn't get any rest at all between the two innings. And with Archer, with Atkinson, I suppose we've seen it more with Atkinson in the last year. He's such a different bowler if he's bowling 87 miles per hour to 82, 83. So that's something to keep an eye on. Ben, what else are you going to say?
So more notes of optimism. And one of this is not going to sound like one, but obviously Travis Head played absolutely brilliantly in that game. But the one thing with him is that there's a reason why he's able to play that sort of innings, and he still averages sort of mid, not even high 40s in Test cricket, mid to low 40s, and that is because he doesn't tend to have absolutely dominant series. Now, he very well could do in this Ashes. This could be remembered as Travis Head's Ashes, and
he was player of the series last time.
Yes, but I wouldn't call that Travis Head's Ashes.
No, I know, but he did have quite a good series.
Yes, he might well make another, but I'm almost less worried about that happening than if Smith had ground his way to 100.
Because that was what Travis Head did was freakish, right?
Yes.
You can't turn up and do that in every Test match, whereas Steve Smith can grind out 100 in every Test match.
I'm trying to follow your logic. So one of their best players has started the series really well, and that's a good thing for England.
Not a good thing, but that I don't think that, like, I'm not totally certain in my head now that he is going to just go on and dominate the series, and actually almost more so because of the effect that innings could have, which is if they then decide, okay, you're our opener for the rest of the series. Like, if England are really worried about Travis Head and they could say, like, okay, what is our best chance to get him out? They would say, well, it's Jofra Archer with the new ball. And it might be that is what Australia give them the opportunity to do now. It might be that he gets away once or twice more, but I think it's also likely that they will be able to keep him more quiet than they would if he was to stay in the middle order because of that. Smith looked as edgy as he ever has, basically, in Test cricket in the first innings. Now, part of that might be down to coming in at number 3, which he really didn't seem to like, even though he's done it before, he's opened before. But he was, talking about they wanted to maybe promote Lyon in the second innings because of how much he didn't like that.
That would have been mad.
Basically. So you might say it's just down to that. But equally, like, England have never troubled Smith that much, basically. And so to do that is encouraging. I guess the other thing as well is just to look at, like, what has changed in what we think before the series to now. Like, I think we knew that England, or we hoped that England had some batters who could play some spark knocks, and they were frustrated at times. Brooke did sparkle. Pope, if anything, has maybe gone slightly up in our estimation since the start of the tour. Root, I'm with Kat. I think will come good at some point. I know you don't fully agree on that, Yaz. And the bowling attack was, we hoped they might be able to trouble Australia, but we didn't fully know it. And now we do have more of an inkling that there will be times when they get under Australia's skin. The worries is just that they are just 1-0 down, and going into a day-night test when Australia have a brilliant record, they could very easily be 2-0 down, still decide that it's capable of winning a test in Australia, but not capable of winning 2 or 3, basically.
Yeah, I think a reason for optimism, which is also kind of simultaneously a source of frustration, is that test, despite the fact that Australia in the end won it comfortably, showed their fallibility, and England wasted an opportunity to exploit that. Travis Head and Mitch Starc were absolutely magnificent because Australia have some magnificent players, but also you look down that 11 and there are areas of weakness, and we saw that. And yet still really 2 performances plus Boland in the second innings were enough to get Australia a win. And then you look at the depth of the bowling. I mean, Boland looked very ordinary in the first innings. Doggett bowled okay, but it's still a long, long way off what Hazelwood and Cummins would have been. There's suggestions that Hazelwood might even potentially be out for the series, which would definitely be an enormous positive for England.
But Cummins looks likely to be back.
Cummins does look likely to be back.
That's a day-night test match, and Australia win pretty much all of them.
That's not a reason for optimism, is it?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But yeah, and personally, a personal view is I think Root will come good at some point. I think he is an even better player now than he was when he visited Australia, and is willing and able to adapt in a way that the rest of the England batting unit is not, or has resisted doing. But yeah, not a reason for optimism. But I do have concerns about the form of Stokes, particularly with Starc, just having him on toast. I think every time Stokes walks out to bat, Stark's going to be throwing the ball, and Stokes at the moment doesn't look like he has a way to play against him. And you want your figurehead, your captain at number 6, middle order, lower order runs going to be so crucial in the series for England with a flaky top order. You need Stokes to be able to make an impact. And at the moment, he's going to struggle to do that when Stark's bowling as well, and he's struggling to figure him out.
That's it for part 2. In part 3, we'll chat England's decision to effectively avoid playing a warm-up game, Stark's late career development, and Head's amazing 100. The Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast are delighted to be working with Naked Wines across the Ashes, bringing you high-quality wines from independent winemakers with bottles matched to your taste. Head to nakedwines.co.uk/Wisden to grab an £80 voucher and 12 top-rated wines for £64.99, including delivery. Answer a quick 10-second quiz and they'll tailor your case to your taste. Stock up ahead of Christmas. Links are in the description below. We've got a bottle here. Me and Butch enjoyed a bottle on last week's podcast. It's lovely stuff, isn't it, Joe?
It's very, very nice. Just what you need after Ashes drubbing.
If you caught our Ashes daily pods, you'd have seen that we've been partnered with our friends at Riverstone Living. We're excited to be recording from their beautiful Fulham residence on December the 4th for day 1 of the second test match. Riverstone are a redefining independent living for people over 65, a combination of luxury 5-star hotel service and amenities and private members club atmosphere with like-minded neighbours, all built with a well-being offer intentionally built for optimal independence. Ben, at the time of recording, the big story is about England's preparation or lack thereof for the pink ball test at Brisbane. England have decided that none of the players who played in the Perth Test will play in the pink ball warm-up game against a fairly strong Prime Minister's 11 in Canberra. Michael Vaughan says it's amateurish if they don't go and play. What harm is playing 2 days of cricket with a pink ball under lights. It's not being old school to suggest that a pink ball is different to a red ball. Playing under the lights is different. Australia have won pretty much every pink ball game in Australia. They've lost once. I'm not too old school to suggest they should play in that game. I'd like to know why they wouldn't. Brendan McCullum, when asked before the decision was made that none of them would play, he said, we've got to work out whether that extra cricket is the key or making sure that camaraderie is tight and morale doesn't drop, because that's a big mantra of the time both Stokesy and I have had throughout this tenure, because we believe in keeping this group really tight. For us, that connectivity and camaraderie is something we pride ourselves on. We will need it over the next few days. What do you reckon, Ben?
In some ways, almost the decision not to do it, you kind of have to sort of admire the courage in some ways, given, you can see if it does all go wrong, if they lose that game heavily as well, you can see the long reads of where it all went wrong being written, that figuring heavily, because it's not just Vaughan, it's Agnew as well. I was reminded of the line in Yes Minister, if you've seen that from like the 80s, where they said that a controversial decision will lose you votes, a courageous decision will lose you the election. And this feels like a courageous decision.
What's the principle though? What are they standing for?
But I think the principle they're standing for is that, like, they are going to do the thing that they think will prepare them best for a test match. And I do think they're not going to not play this game because they want to have a day on the golf course. I said the same thing before the first test as well, or because they're not that bothered. They will prepare in the way that they think is best, and they might, and it seems that what they think is best is, net themselves like a closed session where they can all be working together in a tight-knit group, working on their plans in that way, and that, playing a game, some people going off the diversion of travel plans, it maybe just gets all a bit messy, that kind of thing. That'll be their thinking. I just don't agree with it, basically. Like, I think that there just is merit in going out and making like a 60 or a 70 in a pink ball game. Obviously, they'll be practicing with the pink ball in those warm games, but some of these guys in the squad in the first Test 11 have never played a pink ball game in their careers, and I think that it just the message doesn't matter, but the message you can send it to the team as well. Like, if you go out there as a team and just put in a really strong performance against a good team, that is a way to almost like change a narrative about the tour, which can easily set in after 2 days. It's just a long time to go without playing a proper game of cricket as well. So I think they should be doing it. They obviously don't think so. And in some ways, you have to admire that they are not swayed by people like saying that, like, because if they do lose this test and people point to that, then it will become, almost a sacking offence that has not happened. So I admire that they know that and are doing it anyway, but I think it's wrong.
Yeah, I think the one thing I want to be clear on is that I don't think them not doing this means they're just got their feet up for a few days.
Can't be bothered, they want to play golf, because that's the narrative that will exist around it. But I think anyone reasonable knows that's not the case. They're desperate to win this series, and they're doing what they think is best to do that. We just disagree on the method to get there. And I think there is a danger we end up making too much of this based on the horrors of what happened at Perth, and even more so if they go and lose at Brisbane. But I just feel like this is an example of them making life more difficult for themselves than it needs to be. Like, this is, I understand that they want to stay bonded as a group, but they've had a huge amount of opportunity to do that. This team hasn't changed very much over the last 12 months.
And you can still do that while playing cricket as
and
well.
Also, there is still opportunity to do that before Brisbane Air. It's a very oddly long break, even more so now, because they've given themselves 3 extra days. And you can argue the toss and whether the benefit is as big as some people are making it out. Apparently it's a very slow pitch. It won't necessarily be the same as Brisbane. This is an attack being led by 48-year-old Peter Siddle, who probably, there's also a risk if he takes 4 for nothing, and then suddenly things look even more dismal. I feel like this is one that, as I said earlier, they almost take pride in going against what the media says, or not necessarily going against it, but not caring what the media says. And this feels like one where they could have just made life a little bit easier for themselves.
Just send Crawley and maybe Root or Duckett, guys have made a significant score in that. Not made a significant score, but guys who haven't even batted 30 odd balls in an innings in that test. So send those and let them just feel a bit of bat on ball and but they're not doing it.
It just feels. I know we talked about it in the build up that because of how most tours are nowadays, there isn't that much time to do stuff. The default is not to have warm up games. But on this tour, they do actually have quite a lot of time to do both. They can do the intense training that I know they do, and they talk about a lot behind closed doors. you can also play a 2D game if you want to. It just feels a bit galaxy brain to me.
They've also, the BBC story said that no England players have asked to play in the game. Now, I guess would have come from the England camp, that they know that, but also how many of England's batters would feel comfortable almost breaking ranks to say they want to have a bat, because that would seem to go against the message that's put out by McCullum of connectivity. So I don't know if Ollie Pope thinks, actually, I would like to go and have a couple of innings. And my guess is that someone like Ollie Pope, who just wants to bat and bat and bat, would quite like that opportunity. But it's a story, isn't it? If it leaks out that Pope wanted to bat, or did go and play and then wasn't part of the team, then that becomes messy as well.
It's a really good point, actually. If you look at the number of championship games the England players play in the summer when they can, some of them choose not to play very many at all. Some of them, Pope and Crawley, actually choose to play basically every week they're available. So individuals clearly have different attitudes to how they want to build up to test matches. Ben, Mitchell Starc, we haven't really talked about him yet, player of the match. 758 in the first innings, 10 wickets in the match. He's having a phenomenal year in Test cricket. He's nearly 36 years old. He's now 17th on the all-time list of Test wicket takers. There's a reasonable chance he's in the top 10 by the end of the series. Amazing durability. How has he become this good at this age? Because he's always been rapid. He's not quite as rapid as he was, but he's arguably the best he's ever been in Test cricket.
Well, I think, and not only, so I did a piece before the series looking at sort of how England's attack was going, and as part of that asked for some numbers about how Australia's attack compared. And the person who stood out immediately was Mitchell Starc, because you look over his career and he's been absolutely rapid. I mean, he averages 142 kph. I mean, that's over there's more, or over nearly a contract faster than Mark Wood, and he also swings the ball like nearly a degree per delivery over his career. But what's interesting is how recently actually he's not looking to swing it as much. He still can do it, but actually he's looking for seam more than swing, and he talked about it after this game. I think they talked about the ball almost going like a hockey puck and therefore not swinging as much, and so he was looking for that wobble seam basically that Cummins and Hayes would have perfected, and that's what was his weapon as well. And that is, he's now basically, as he's lost a little bit of pace while still being one of the quickest bowlers in the world, he has added another weapon to his arsenal that has become his main weapon while not losing the swing that he has. There was a ball which didn't get a wicket, but I remember in the second innings he swung it back between, I think maybe Pope's bat and pad, and just missing the off stump. You're like, wow, he can still do that if he wants to.
Always makes that ball more dangerous if he's not exclusively looking for the in-swinger.
Exactly, yeah. And yeah, at 35 to be having one of your best years. I mean, he was brilliant on that West Indies tour, albeit on helpful surfaces. And you just think as well, just for like, just how much Australia needed him to stand up in this game, where we're talking about, this being England's chance without two of the big three, and he just stands up as the main guy, absolutely dominates the game, and actually in some ways I think a little bit underrated, because his average isn't quite as good as Hazelwood and Cummins is, but he takes wickets as frequently as Cummins does, and he's almost allowed to do that by how economical those guys are. And he's got the white ball record as well, and just so much longevity. To have played 100 test matches and still be bowling as quickly as he is at 35, we marvel at how quick Wood is as a guy of a similar age. But Wood has played a fraction of the test match that Starc has, and he's got that relentless hunger to get better, which if you are the fastest bowler in the world, you don't necessarily need to do. You don't need to be going and adding more skills, and yet he's doing that as well. Yeah, he's a totally brilliant bowler who I think in some ways we don't appreciate enough, especially as English people, but almost don't fear enough as well in some ways.
And Joe, Travis Head, we haven't really talked about it because I don't think we wanted to. But it's one of
big negligent in there.
It's one of the great Ashes 100. It's the 7th quickest Test 100 ever, full stop, no caveats. And the game was genuinely up for grabs going into that final innings. I probably had Australia as just favourites, but not by miles. A lot of people said that England were favourites going into it, and Head completely changes not just the game, but actually changed how the series feels.
Yeah, I think one of the great is one of the more overused phrases in cricket in general, and possibly this podcast too. But I think in this instance, it genuinely falls into that category. He is unbelievably watchable, isn't he? He's just, even as an England fan, you just couldn't take your eyes off it. There's a kind of wildness to it. And he's obviously kind of a bit of a wild bloke as well. I think he's quite likeable. It's not often that England get torn to shreds by an Australian batter that I like. But I think in this instance, that's probably an exception. And like, I suppose in a way he rode his luck a little bit in that, a few were kind of coming off the edge. But also there wasn't he didn't get dropped, did he? I don't think.
I don't think so.
I think in that sense it was chanceless,
Yeah.
even though he was taking a chance every single ball. It's backing away, taking balls off leg stump. But I think, as Ben was talking about earlier, I think he really understood the dimensions of the ground really well. Some of the risks weren't quite as big as they might have looked because it was sailing over the third man boundary. And yeah, as we said, this is a player who was supposedly out of form coming into the series, but he's obviously got an unbelievable big match temperament. He just loves the occasion, loves the attention. And now Australia have a really interesting decision to make. Do you even dare to think about moving him from opening back down to number 5, given that he just won Australia a match single-handedly with the bat at least? Or do you keep him in that middle order slot where he's done so much damage before? And I think, there's probably not a wrong decision in there. If I was Australia, I think you'd have to keep him as an opener. I think of it from England's perspective. When you're opening bowling at Brisbane, do you want Travis Head standing at the other end, or do you want Khawaja? And I think you want Khawaja. So if I was Australia, I would keep Head in that role. And if they end up dropping him back down to number 5 in the rest of the series, then so be it. But a hugely valuable cricketer, and the one who really brings dynamism to this Australian team, which otherwise could be a little bit one-paced in terms of the batting, and also brings a bit of colour and life to the side as well. Great entertainer, and he's now got a history of doing it in big games against what he obviously most famously the World Test Championship final against India. He's been man of a series in an Ashes series. He's been player of the match in a World Cup final. And we haven't even got to Adelaide yet, where he makes runs for fun. I think he's player of the match in his last 3 Test matches at Adelaide, where we go obviously for the 3rd Test.
So we've got the day-nighter that Australia always win, and then Adelaide, where Travis Head is always player of the match. So
Come Melbourne. Come Melbourne.
Right, that is everything for today's show. Cheers, Joe. Cheers, Ben. If you've enjoyed the show, give us a like. Subscribe on YouTube, give a rating on Spotify or Apple if you're listening on the podcast. It all helps. That's everything for today's show. If you want more for us, we've got a couple of Patreon episodes lined up for the next few days, and we'll be back with the weekly show next Monday.